Okay, so I'm here with Councillor Peter O'Donoghue from North Cork. We're in the Kingsley Hotel, right across the road from Cork County Hall, where there was a full council meeting this morning. And Peter, you put forward an interesting motion for debate. Just before, I'm going to ask you to read your motion so that people know what we're talking about. But just before I do that, I just want to bring attention to one paragraph of the speech. You gave a 3-page speech, very illuminating, in the council chamber today, which generated a lot of response and a lot of debate, as it should.
You can say that again.
Yeah. But before we go there, I just want to read out this paragraph for those that are watching in. We know that cancer rates have increased dramatically. A recent report by the EU Commission found that Ireland now has the second highest rate of new cancer diagnoses in the EU, with the number of cancer cases projected to grow by 47% in Ireland from 2022 to 2040. Like, those figures are stark.
Yeah, they're off the chart, aren't they? Yeah. So that's I suppose a question that we have to ask ourselves in our society now, like, what is causing this increase in cancer?
Yes.
And that the fact that we haven't even asked that question as of yet, or the fact that our society isn't even aware of that issue, it kind of raises questions of its own right, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, it was interesting what happened in there today, because, I mean, these are conversations that are happening around me anyway, and others. Late stage diagnosis of cancer with a very short survival span thereafter. So I know that that's happening because people are saying it to me, and people are noticing it.
And just on cancer, my own brother died from cancer, very rapid cancer, before say the COVID lockdowns.
Okay.
So not every cancer is attributed maybe to the restrictions and measurements that happened at the time. But the fact of the matter is that the rates have increased dramatically.
Yes.
Like, it's off the charts, and this has to be questioned.
Yes, and the fact that this EU Commission found that Ireland now has the second highest rate of new cancer diagnoses in the EU, with cancer cases projected to grow by 47%. I hadn't seen those figures before. Okay, so I'm going to hand over to you. Would you just read out the motion? And this is the motion that you put forward in council chambers in County Hall earlier this morning.
Yeah, so my motion here today before Cork County Council was that, considering it is 5 years since the introduction of the COVID lockdowns, Cork County Council would write to the Taoiseach and request that a fully transparent, independent public inquiry into the previous government's reaction to the COVID-19 virus be held within the coming 3 months, and that this inquiry would also investigate the causes of the major increase in excess deaths in the last 3 years, and if these deaths are linked to the COVID restrictions. That was my motion today before Cork County Council.
Okay, and that seems perfectly reasonable to me. You want that this inquiry would also investigate the causes of major increase in excess deaths. So you have stats here, which you also read out in council chambers, so it's on the public record, of 22,000 excess deaths which have happened since 2022. Is that correct?
No, since January of 2021. So between January 2021 and February of this year, 2025, there has been over 22,100 excess deaths in this country. So over 22,000 people have died in this country than what would have been expected to die in this country during that time period. And I suppose it beggars belief again that there's no questions being asked. What is happening? What is going on? This is the reality of the situation, and nobody's talking about it. So I suppose, look, back in 2020, we had the lockdowns, the COVID lockdowns, we had the restrictions, and there was a lot of fear out there at the time. In 2020, I think it was just over 1,000 excess deaths were, I suppose, counted during that year, and the most of them happened in the month of April. But since 2020, 2021, 22, 23, 24, we've had 5,000 plus excess deaths every year and absolute silence. And we're told the pandemic is over. So I don't know. I just thought, look, that 5 years later, surely questions need to be raised, and that was the reason why I brought this motion here today.
Okay. And yeah, because it's happening currently, and it's happening all around us. So this isn't a controversial statement to make. That can we please inquire into what is causing the rate of excess deaths in Ireland at the moment?
Yeah.
So tell me, how did your motion go down? How was it received?
Oh, my motion went down like a lead balloon. That's the way it went down.
But you had a seconder. You proposed the motion and you had a seconder.
Yeah, so I had a seconder, my independent colleague William O'Leary. He seconded, which is very important because you have to have a seconder to speak about these issues and speak about these motions. And that was very important. Another colleague of mine, independent councillor John Buckley, and the vote that came up afterwards, he voted in line with myself and William, but outside of that I can't remember anyone who voted with us. All the rest of the...
There's only 3. But before we get to that, let's talk about the response. Did different councillors had comments to make on your motion?
Well, they had comments to make, but very little had actual comments on the actual text of the motion. You know, I suppose I was accused of making a political football out of COVID. I was accused of fear-mongering, scaremongering. I was accused of being insensitive. And these councillors, they I suppose spoke that they couldn't agree with the motion or couldn't support the motion based on this. But I pointed out that my motion, like Ron Seal would paint, it says exactly what it says in the tin. I'm just looking for an inquiry.
Yes.
I'm just looking for a public investigation, and both into the reaction of our previous government to COVID-19 and into the excess deaths. There was nothing more in my motion than that, and that it was received so negatively. Like
Why?
To tell you the truth, it wouldn't surprise me, because all these political parties who these councillors are involved with, every one of these parties, they actually fully supported the lockdowns at the time
100%,
and the restrictions that were put in place.
Yeah. Like, it's interesting. I think it's great. It's great what you've done here, because we can actually now discuss these things. It's 5 years later, but you have brought a motion and opened a debate in council chambers, which wouldn't have happened before. So in that sense, I do think it's good. And a lot of the councillors responded with their own personal experiences during lockdown, I think, and their own personal losses. So I think it might be no harm to acknowledge that I do think there's a lot of trauma out there still from what happened, and the loss and the fear that was driven into people through the media and through consistent advertising and through certain individuals repeating this message over and over again. But we now know a lot of the message just wasn't true. I mean, COVID was blown out of all proportions. So I do think what you have done is very valuable, and they are obviously at a point where they need to protect the policies that their parties introduced. So tell me what happened. It was interesting what they did in the council in order for this motion not to be voted on itself. Your motion wasn't actually voted on.
My motion wasn't voted on, and I was insisting that my motion be voted on. I said, look, we live in a democracy. You know, if we're not in agreement, let's put it to a vote. And I felt that I was entitled to put it to a vote. And actually, councillors who would have disagreed with me personally actually sided with me that the motion was on the agenda and that should be put to a vote.
Good.
But instead, what happened was that a counter motion was proposed, which was, I think, basically was asking that the motion be deferred really until this inquiry, which is apparently currently taking place. And look, this inquiry is behind closed doors. It's got individuals who are handpicked who are in the inquiry, you know.
But even if we don't go as far as that, right? So that amendment was, who do you know the councillor who proposed that amendment?
I think it was Councillor Patrick Mulcahy.
Patrick Mulcahy, okay. The point is, so the amendment was to say there is a government inquiry in process, and they're setting that up. And so the council voted on this amendment to say, well, that should be let go ahead.
Yeah, it was basically said that my motion was premature.
Yeah.
And that we needed to see what the outcome of this inquiry was before my motion would be passed.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which is kind of incredible in a way, because your motion is about excess deaths. The second part of it is about excess deaths, which is happening now, not something that happened 5 years ago.
Yeah.
So if you wanted an inquiry into what's happening currently to try to open up a debate and exploration and find some information about what could possibly be the cause of these excess deaths currently, then you would vote in favour of this of your motion.
Yeah. So look, this motion that's being proposed at the moment has no mention of excess deaths. Apparently these aren't happening. So that is the major difference between what I proposed and what is being proposed at the moment at government level.
Yeah. So Councillor Patrick Mackay came with a motion that was like, let's go with the status quo. Let's hold on to the status quo as it is. There's a public inquiry. Well, there's a government inquiry that's going to happen behind closed doors over there, and it's happening, and therefore your motion can't happen. So they held a vote on that.
Yeah, held a vote on that. So obviously I voted against it. Councillor William O'Leary voted against it, and Councillor John Buckley voted against it. As far as I can remember, that was the only three.
That's the only three that I got as well.
Yeah. So that's like, I have massive questions. Like, why would someone vote against a motion such as this? Remember, all it's asking for is a public inquiry, and all it's asking for is an investigation. It's not accusing anyone. It's not putting blame at anyone. It's just asking for an inquiry. And why would 52 councillors not support that? That just beggars belief for me, blows my mind.
Why, indeed? Because as you say here, the request was, excuse me, for a fully transparent, independent public inquiry into the previous government's reaction to the COVID-19 virus. I mean, there's nothing very controversial there.
Not in my opinion, no.
Yeah. No. Okay. Listen, thank you very much for your time, Peter. It was great to meet you.
No, thanks, Louise, and great to meet you too. And thanks for coming to Cork, and I wish you a safe journey home.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye-bye.